Good morning. Welcome to First Parish in Framingham. Welcome if this is your first time joining us, and welcome back if this is your community. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you move around in the world, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We welcome you here in this meeting house or on Zoom, or wherever and whenever you may be watching this service in the future. I'm your worship associate this morning. My name is Allison Park, and I use she, her pronouns. Please be sure to read the announcements in the order of service. Immediately following worship, you're invited to join us for coffee in Scott Hall just across the courtyard. Please take a moment to turn your phones or other devices to their quietest settings. While beeps and buzzes can be distracting, we welcome your human noises, cooing, babbling, laughter, and all. We especially love the sound of your singing, so please join in. Since 1701, people have gathered as this community to rest or recharge, to be challenged or affirmed. These people are like you. You belong here. Maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. We are happy to have you here with us. I now invite you to take a comfortable breath in and out. Continue to breathe like this as you begin to release whatever you need to let go of to be more fully present to yourself, one another, and the sacred in this time and place. Now, if Dante could join us, we'll light our chalice. Each time when we gather, we light the flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith, to mark this time as special, as time apart from time, as holy time. The words to accompany our chalice lighting were written by our very own Lee Kenvey. This chalice is for the living, the changing, the becoming. This chalice is for losing the script of your life, the chapters about who you are in other people's stories. This chalice is for the lost GPS that was supposed to show you how to get where they expected you to go. This chalice is for skipping the directions, coloring outside the lines, painting not by the number, but by silence, by wild abandon. With a brush you made yourself from light deep inside, startling, vivid, a new voice that already knows you. Finally, a true story. Please rise in body or in spirit to sing along to hymn number 15, The Lone Wild Bird. service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. Please be seated.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Strauss, the Director of Religious Exploration here at First Parish, and I say with you all, good morning and welcome to church. And I use she, her pronouns. Okay, let's find out what I have in my griot bag today, because we have been talking this month about stewardship and being stewards of our house of worship, of our land, of everything around us is important, but being stewards of ourselves is also important, taking care of ourselves. And one of the ways that we can do that is by seeking silence and solitude. So this book is called Silence, and it is by Lemniskitz. That is the name of the person that's on the book. And it goes like this. In the silence, I can hear the waves crashing and the wind playing with my kite. At night, I can hear what the stars tell me. And in the morning, what the birds say. When I listen, I can hear my feet when I'm dancing, my heart when I'm running, my legs when I'm swimming, and my breath when I'm still. In spring, I can hear bees loving flowers. In summer, trees chattering. In fall, leaves falling. In winter, snow twinkling. Be still. Listen. What do you hear? And now we will sing our children and teachers to church school.
I am the Reverend Aaron Stockel-Wiseman. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm your senior minister. This is the time in our service that we set aside for the sharing of the things which weigh deepest on our hearts. Dr. Vivek Murthy writes, "It is a world, this world, where we respect and value each other, where we look out for one another, and where we create opportunities to lift up one another. A world where our highs are higher because we celebrate them together, and our lows feel more manageable because we respond to them together. Where our recovery is faster because we grieve and we rebuild together." So this is the time that we share those highs and those lows. Just a reminder, you can submit your joys or sorrows either online or by writing them down in this book that is normally at the back of our sanctuary. After our final candle is lit, we will sing the 2 verses of "There Is a Love," found in your order of service. This morning we are a people of sorrow and concern. These are the sorrows of our gathered community. Marianne Orlando shares this: grieving a 60-year-old friend who has been living with a brain tumor, sent out a farewell to his friends and loved ones, and has now transitioned to hospice. This sorrow from Abby Merson: my 80-year-old cousin who was on an RV trip with his wife and in Tennessee succumbed to COVID and died on Thursday, March 21st. His wife of 60 years and his 3 daughters were by his side. This from Kathy Mello: please pray for my sister Peg and her husband Keith, who has ALS and is declining faster than we hoped. And this from Jan Bolton: I am thinking of Debbie Taylor, whose father passed away this week. We light a candle for the joys of our community which remain unspoken this morning. And we light one final candle for all of those sorrows too great to share. Let us now sing "There Is a Love." The words are in your order of service. There is a love holding. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in His love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all we rest in His love. This is the part of our service that we can turn a little bit more inward. We return to the silence and the quiet and the stillness of this place. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls us each by our true first name, which is beloved. This world, this morning cold, yesterday rainy, still shows new life. Green shoots working their way out of the soil. This is what we are thankful for. New life emerging, a chance to try again. The strength of life and earth and of this gathered community. We give thanks for the people sitting to our left and our right, for whatever is supporting us, a pew, a bed, a chair, the strength of this community. We are also a people of sorrow and concern. There is brokenness in our world. We lift up all those who are mourning this day, all those who are ill, all those living with addiction, all those healing. May we find ways to lend a helping hand and a listening ear our world is beautiful, beautiful and broken. Our work is to rebuild this world, to bend the arc of the universe towards justice, towards a deeper peace. And this work depends on all of us. We pray for all of those in the war-torn parts of our world. Because we are far away, perhaps prayer seems the only option in sending good thoughts. But let us also have courage to work, to bring peace in all of the ways that we know how. And friends, we are human. Sometimes our humanity shows a little bit too much. We fumble with our words. We are barrier builders. We build walls between our authentic selves and others, and that mystery beyond understanding. But because we are breathing, there is always time to rebuild, to say I'm sorry, and to start again anew. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. Our sermon today is on stillness, so let us practice that stillness for a minute. Time when we can pray the prayers of our own hearts or simply do absolutely nothing for one whole minute. May this stillness continue to sustain us throughout our coming week.
Good morning. I am Diane Bassett, and I'm here this morning both as a member of First Parish and as the manager of Framingham Community Farm. It is a joy to share with you some information about the farm as part of our Share the Plate offering this month. We are a food pantry garden with roots here at First Parish. The original garden was built at Edwards Church, and we gardened for several years here at First Parish. We were created, I remember the original day, with youth from the youth group and Kathleen Hepler building beds and filling them with dirt and getting started. It was wonderful. We are now preparing for our 8th growing season, doing one small part to ease the burden of hunger in our community very locally. Project Bread tells us that as of January this year, 15% of all households and 19% of households with children experience food insecurity. Here, this is exacerbated by the high cost of housing, which creates real economic vulnerability for low-income residents. This year, our little community farm donated nearly 1,200 pounds of produce to a place to turn in Natick and Daniel's Table here in Framingham. This includes more than 100 pounds of greens grown by Larry Decker and Robin Hegvik at their plot at the Pratt Street Community Garden. My leadership at the farm is an extension of my UU values. I'm connected there to so many volunteers, young and old, from varied faith organizations, schools, and community groups, some who give many hours every year, and some who drop in to volunteer occasionally as their life allows. I see some of you here in the pews today, and I thank you. Together, we learn about food justice. We learn about compassion and activism and interdependence. We share the joy of good work with good people for a good cause. We ease the burden of hunger among neighbors and friends, and we advance in a small way the cause of food security. At the garden, I am most reminded that service is a prayer. Because the farm relies on volunteers and we work hard to seek donations of essential items, our operating budget is small. But each year, we do need to pay for our use of water and compost and other essentials for gardening. And so, with gratitude, I invite you to support the work of Framingham Community Farm through a donation to this Share the Plate offering. And of course, if you enjoy gardening or even want to give it a try, join Larry and Robin at their plot, or join us over at Edwards Church to prepare the beds, plant, weed and weed and weed, and harvest, because there's always something to do. Thank you.
Thank you, choir. That was lovely. Thank you, Dean. Today's reading is by Angela Narciso Torres. It's called Chore. My friend turns anything into prayer. Sweeping the leaves, shaving his beard, washing dishes, every act a purging of what doesn't serve. Today, I'm folding laundry. I start with jeans, crisp from the dryer, smoothing the creases, then draping them on wooden hangers. Shaking wrinkles from the sheets, I square the corners the way Mother taught. White t-shirts stacked flat on a shelf, sundresses on felt hangers, sweaters nestled in drawers. I find a place for every blouse, every scarf, until it feels inevitable. Order our days, the fragment floats up from decades of Sundays, like words of a forgotten song, in your peace. My mantra, fold, hang, repeat. The hamper half empty, the bureau warm with balled up socks. Please rise, in body or in spirit, for hymn number 352, Find a Stillness.
Gosh, on days like today, I feel like we need another hymn, something like In the Brisk Second Winter. Quite the fall day, winter day, we are having. It is the year 2007. I am on day 10 or 11 of a 14-day hiking trip in New Mexico. And we have arrived at our campsite for the day way too early. Like, we're gonna eat lunch there, and that's not normally something we do, so I am suspicious. While a lot of this trip has been physically challenging because of altitude and distance and the work of building trail, there are also parts of it that are purposefully designed to be challenging emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So I have this feeling that we are about to be spiritually challenged. So with my back feeling lightened, like feeling almost like I am flying because I've put my pack down, I am ready to hear about this next challenge. We are told to prepare to spend the night alone, out under the stars, in shelters that we will make with half of our tent, either a fly or the rest of the tent, to pack just what we need for one night, and to get ready to head out. Our guides bring us to our appointed spots at the edge of what is called Deer Lake Mesa in Cimarron, New Mexico, in northeastern New Mexico. And the night out was successful, really nothing to write home about, thank goodness. And now the sun is rising. And the sun always paints its light so beautifully on the high desert. The sun is rising, and I have this mystical feeling, this experience of connection, even in the midst of solitude. This realization that everyone I know and love is in front of me, even though there are thousands of miles between me and my loved ones. I feel connection knowing that they are all somewhere out there, all united, even though I am here in solitude. I've had similar experiences where I can feel the presence of all those that I love, even though I am alone. Interestingly, this is normally found for me in experiences of travel, when I am furthest from home and when I am about to turn back and start my journey back home. It's like when you use a labyrinth, whether you're walking it or rolling it or using your finger to trace the path, and you've gotten to the center point, which is the furthest point away, your spiritual apogee, and you turn around in that final moment, completely alone, but beginning to return to community. And so often when we are furthest away, we rush to head back home. But what about honoring that moment of solitude and connection? The beauty of that moment of solitude was that I was not alone. It was that I felt so deeply connected to others. We have also all likely felt that same feeling of being so alone in a crowd, haven't we? We have felt that intense desire to be connected. We have felt alone. Loneliness is a natural reaction. That feeling is biological. There is no shame in feeling lonely. One thing that I think to remember is that our feelings of loneliness, as I said, are not necessarily bad. They are a biological signal to find deeper connection. John Cacioppo, a pioneering researcher in the psychology of loneliness, conceptualized it as akin to hunger pains or yawns. Our stomachs growl, we find food. We yawn and we recognize that we are tired and we seek rest. Our feelings of loneliness are meant to be a signal too. When we are lonely, our evolutionary past is telling us to proactively seek out social connection within our tribe for both our physical safety and our mental health as well. That feeling of loneliness then triggers the release of the stress hormone cortisol, which increases our blood pressure. And that feeling is useful in small doses, but it is detrimental in states of chronic loneliness. We're then also in this state of fight or flight, and we start to misread other people's behaviors. When that happens, Mary Kay Duchesne and Mark Sunby explain, when our friends haven't called, we think they don't like me anymore. When we walk into a party feeling awkward, we don't know where to turn or who to talk to, so instead of reaching out for social connection, we withdraw. This self-critical thinking causes us to further withdraw, which can then accelerate into a downward spiral, resulting in even greater withdrawal and loneliness. This further spiral is known as the cognitive discrepancy model of loneliness. which is a really long word and name for suggesting that our hunger pains of loneliness are often precipitated by a social event that goes poorly. And we use that newest piece of evidence to suggest that we are quite lonely. I have walked so many times into that convention of ministers that happens in June, General Assembly and Ministry Days. I've walked into that convention so many times with people skilled at building connection only to not find a group to go out to dinner with. And then I get into a cycle of wondering why I even bother going to these events. It's all natural. It's all human. A feeling is fleeting. In a rather noisy world, it can be tough being the quiet one. During my first semester of seminary, another seminarian he was Quaker, and he would hold meetings for worship in the Quaker tradition, which involves sitting in silence. We started out at the beginning of the semester with 15 minutes of silence, and by the end we were doing a full hour of silence. We would sit in a meditation room in the chapel, and he would explain some of the practices of Quaker worship, where you sit in silence waiting for promptings of the Spirit to move you to speak. And I remember not those moments where I would feel moved to speak or someone else would feel moved to speak, but the intense feeling of warmth and connection in those moments of silence. And in an environment there in seminary that seemed to praise talking, it was always a deeply recentering practice to sit in quiet with others. Some years after that, in the middle of my first ministry in College Station, Texas, I attended a 3-day silent retreat at a Jain monastery that was on an old cattle ranch, because it is Texas after all. And I remember during that retreat, I read a lot, which isn't how you're really supposed to do a silent retreat. And I checked email a lot, not too frequently, but enough, so it wasn't the purest form of a silent retreat, and sometimes I talked, so it was not, I wasn't doing it right. And yet, I remembered that we do not have to be perfect in our spiritual practices. We simply have to do them with attention and intention. And it was a good experience. Later that year, I remember sharing on New Year's Eve, when of course we all write, where I always write my reflections of the previous year and put them up on Facebook. And I shared that I had attended the silent retreat. And a colleague responded, "Yeah, but you don't have any kids. Every day is a silent retreat, if you want it to be." Yeah, that's true. I acknowledge that. Of course, when I went on that retreat, I didn't share that I was going on that retreat for a reason. I had separated from my first wife at that point, and we were about a month away from finalizing the divorce. And the silence at home was so painful. It rang so loudly. I needed the container of another place to allow that quiet to be recharging and not draining. Silence and solitude that you choose can be so incredibly liberating. Now, quiet and solitude are such crucial parts of ending the epidemic of loneliness that we're working to end here in this church and in all of Metro West. And silence and solitude as a way to end loneliness, that feels counterintuitive. We think that the jazz musician always has to be paying attention to their bandmates, but the truth is they are not playing some cosmic combination instrument that includes bass lines and lead lines and rhythm lines. They're playing their own individual instruments. In a jazz band or in any musical group, if you lose your sense of solitude, you lose the music. You have to be in your own lane while also paying attention to the rest of the band. In his interview with On Being's Krista Tippett, Dr. Vivek Murthy explains this about his thoughts about how to end the epidemic of loneliness. And he gets to the fourth and final step, which he says is solitude. He says this is also counterintuitive because you might think, solitude? If I'm lonely, do I really need more time alone? But he says loneliness is not so much about how many people you have around you. It's about whether you feel like you belong. It's about whether you truly know your own value and feel like you are connected to other people. It's about the quality of your relationships with others and yourself. The solitude is important because it is in moments of solitude when we allow the noise around us to settle that we can truly reflect, that we can find moments in our life to be grateful for. For those moments of solitude have become so increasingly rare, he says, because of all of the white noise in our lives. It's been, and all of the other space has been filled with devices. Back in the day, he remembers, when I was waiting for a bus, that's the time that I would just sit down and think. I was actually waiting. Now, if I'm waiting for a bus or waiting for the subway, then I'm looking at my phone in between those moments to either be efficient and clear out my inbox or to find something interesting. So our mind is constantly filled, and we don't have that silence that is so integral to growth. And you might think, well, yeah, I could do that, but I'd feel bored. Boredom is not a bad thing. I am sure that we can each think of moments where we have chosen solitude and where we have chosen silence. As spiritual practices, they can be quite powerful practices which are about finding a way to be closer to your sense of holiness, whether you call that God or the mystery beyond understanding or the greater good. Spiritual practices need attention, intention, and repetition. They do not need your perfection. Like what Angela Narciso Torres writes about in her poem that Allison read a few moments ago, we can turn anything into prayer with intention. The Quaker educator Parker Palmer says this about solitude. Solitude does not necessarily mean living apart from others. Rather, it means never living apart from one's self. It is not about the absence of other people. It is about being fully present to ourselves, whether or not we are with others. Community does not necessarily mean living face to face with others. Rather, it means never losing the awareness that we are connected to one another. It is not about the presence of other people. It is about being fully open to the reality of relationship, whether or not we are alone. Realizing something as I preach to you, that I often preach about the saving power of being in community. And that is only half of the truth. I mention that every time I officiate a memorial service, turn towards others, I remind the grievers, not away from others. And perhaps in moments of deep grief, that is sound advice. But there is also deep wisdom in turning inward every now and then. Claire Peace explains in a reflection published by G's magazine recently, which is a phenomenal publication on liberal Christianity. I think that the title of the magazine is just perfect, G's. It's great. She writes, several years ago, I suffered a concussion that brought my life to a halt. In the early days, any sensory stimulation felt overwhelming. So most of my time was spent in silence and solitude. Space to myself was unsettling. It took time. I learned from the company of guides such as Maya Angelou, Henry Nouwen, and Annie Dillard, much journaling and prolonged periods of being alone in nature. Eventually, an experience of loneliness and limitation transformed into one of deep healing. I was met in my aloneness by a deep and loving presence, one who, on the other side of my resistance, invited me to pay attention to the wisdom and the wonder that is waiting when we slow down. I observed the trees and the wildflowers and the water, and I learned to recognize my authentic self in the need to sing and sway alongside them. I wept, I grieved, I laughed out loud in the alleyways around my neighborhood. My friends gathered here. Perhaps that is the key, affirming that we have inherent worth and dignity by ourselves and also in community, affirming that we can go on a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, aided by our communities and figured out in solitude. Both of those can be true. Perhaps it is these moments of solitude that we also find our connection to the divinity beyond understanding, or perhaps it is found too when we gather here. May it be so, and amen. So I invite you now to rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn, number 360. And so as we leave this friendly place, let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen, and go in peace.